Hello everyone, this is part 14 of What If Naruto Was a Prodigy and in the Anbu, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
It was dark, and wet, and cold. The transition for Naruto was jarring. One moment, he was sitting on the grass in training ground 1, listening to Jiraiya of the Sannin speak to him as the breeze brushed past his hair and the heat from the fires radiated down to him. In less than a second, he found himself somewhere completely different. He was lying on his back, eyes staring up at a dimly lit ceiling. An instant later, he had risen to his feet. Water dripped from him, the walls and the ceiling. Naruto reached for his belt and pulled out a kunai. Where was he? It looked to be some kind of indoor canal, maybe the inside of an aqueduct, or a sewer. Dim red lights glowed ahead, and pipes stretched all across the walls, leading further down the long tunnel to distant light. He was at a crossroads. The path before he led deeper into the tunnel, lined by the red emergency lights, but the two paths on his left and right and the one behind led only to the empty depths of darkness. He eyed the paths, smothering his emotions and trying to think logically. The enemy would be expecting an assault from the front. Going down the long path towards the light was an obvious ambush. He glanced to his left and right and, chakra settled, he chose the one on the left. He walked towards the inky blackness and out of the range of the emergency lighting. He didn't have to walk for long. There was a light ahead, and Naruto cautiously moved towards it. He emerged from the darkness, only to see that he had arrived at another crossroads, almost identical to the first. Wait. Naruto observed his surroundings very carefully. In fact, it looked exactly like the one he had just walked out of. He took a deep breath, and then bent down and placed his kunai on the ground. Then, he stood, turned around and walked back into the darkness. He came out of it at another crossroads and walked to the middle of the intersection. There, on the ground, was his kunai. He smiled grimly, picked up his weapon and stared down the tunnel. It seemed there was only one way he could go. He began to move forward, idly noting how each emergency light he passed got that little bit brighter. The pipes seemed to stretch on forever, riveted down and held up on the walls with giant bolts. It was when he was passing one particular pipe that he noticed something etched into the metal. It looked like rust, except that it was darker in color, and Naruto had to scratch at it with his kunai to reveal the writing. 011506. What did that mean? Was it a password, or a code? Naruto memorized it, stood back and continued walking. He kept an eye on the pipes, and came across another patch of rust. Underneath it, he saw another 6-digit number code. 010344. That one seemed familiar. Naruto had sworn he had seen those numbers before. He was thinking about it as he came upon another spot of rust. This time, when he scratched it out, his blood ran cold as he stared down at the numbers. 009676. They weren't codes. They weren't passwords. They were registration numbers, shinobi registration numbers. Naruto knew that one in particular because had he been the one to fill in the casualty report once he had returned from the manufactorium. It was Yuna's registration code, and now that he had been prompted, the second one was familiar because it had been the code of the Akamaiki that had saved his life during the first bombing of the Blitz. Naruto looked around and saw that along the pipes, there were countless patches of rust and weakening metal. He suddenly had no desire to see what they said, and ignored them as he kept walking forward. The tunnel seemed to stretch on for eternity, but Naruto knew he was making progress. The emergency lights bolted to the walls were becoming brighter and brighter, and the light at the end seemed to drawing closer and closer. It was also getting hotter, much hotter, actually. Naruto abruptly realized that his clothes were almost dry from his initial fall, and that a lot of the dampness that he could feel was his sweat. He stopped. From what he knew, Jiraiya had placed a seal on him that would allow him to go into his mind and meet the tailed demon sealed into his navel. He eyed the lights and considered the heat carefully. He must be getting closer to it. He kept on walking. As he drew closer and closer, it grew much hotter to the point of being painful. A terrible wind was beginning to blow throughout the sewer, a wind that reeked of something foul and dead. Naruto pressed on, and had to shield his face as it grew stronger and stronger. The heat licked at his skin, and Naruto grunted as he pushed forward. It was almost like a physical barrier, but he hunched up and pressed against it with all his might. Then, abruptly, with a single step, he was through it. Overbalanced, he came crashing down and landed in the dark water once more. He spluttered, spitting water out of his mouth, not even wanting to consider where it could have come from, and staggered to his feet. Then he paused, and his eyes widened. He was out of the tunnels, and he had arrived in a giant room. The ceiling above had disappeared into the darkness, and he couldn't see any sign of it. The lights on the walls were bright, but they somehow didn't seem to penetrate much of the darkness in the room, providing only enough light to cast a dim glow on everything. Giant pipes lined the walls, running up, across, and then behind Naruto to disappear into the blackness. And, on the other side of the room, there was a giant set of golden bars. They were enormous, taller than the village gate, and they, like the ceiling, stretched up into blackness. The bars gleamed with a dull shine, and paper fluttered as a wind blew to and from the cage. Naruto's eyes were drawn to the source of the noise, and he saw that there was a piece of paper where there should have been a lock and a keyhole. A piece of paper. Oh. Naruto's face was grim as he stared into the cage. The darkness there was too strong, and he could barely make out the tag that represented his seal. He began to slowly walk forward, his feet making loud splashes that seemed to echo in the room. He did not want to sneak up on the thing that lay behind those bars, after all. The wind was warm and foul, and Naruto could hazard a pretty good guess as to the source of it. Then, as he was about to take another step towards the cage, barely having reached the middle of the room, something stirred. Naruto froze as a glowing scarlet eye appeared from the darkness, one bigger than any man. Stop. The other eye opened now, and they fixated on Naruto like a predator fixated on its prey. Naruto could make out a figure, something huge, with a long snout, big ears, and a human-like mouth that curled up with something between a smile and a snarl. Giant, gleaming white teeth were reflected off the light. If you don't stop, you'll die. Naruto took a deep breath and then abruptly realized that he had no idea what to say. His mouth open, he stood there, staring at the shadowed figure of what the nine-tailed demon fox in a way that must have seemed like he was gaping. There was a rush of hot air, and a low, deep chuckle that caused the hairs on the back of his arm to stand up. Naruto closed his mouth, and then decided to do what he did for anybody he didn't know. Good afternoon, he greeted quietly. If you say so. The voice boomed throughout the room, and the water around him rippled through the force of it. Naruto couldn't pick out any particular emotion, but on the whole, it did not sound very friendly. I wouldn't know. I am stuck here in the cage, in the cold and the dark. Naruto didn't quite know what to say to that. The demon had a fair point. He took a breath to steady himself and started to walk forward. There was a flash of movement, and then Naruto reflexively jumped back as something large and red and angry slammed into the bars of the cage. The entire room shuddered, and the air whistled. Naruto landed further away from the cage, his eyes wide as he stared at the full might of what had been sealed within him. It stood larger than the Hokage's tower, larger than the village walls. Its fur was red and orange, its teeth as large as a house, its eyes glowing in the light. It seemed to be surrounded by aura of dark red light, which wreathed and oozed around its gargantuan form. I said stop. The voice hadn't changed at all. The giant fox stared down at Naruto, its eyes pinning the young Anbu to the ground with a simple stare. If you come forward again, you'll die. Naruto gathered himself. You're the nine-tailed demon fox, he said. It wasn't a question, but the beast answered. Yes. I'm a shinobi, Naruto began, but he was cut off. I know. The fox was lowering itself back into the darkness, dropping back into the water with a loud splash, and Naruto could see it resting its giant head on its paws. I fight, Naruto continued. He swallowed. Sometimes my enemies are too strong. Sometimes I need to use your power to win. He paused. The giant fox said nothing. Will you let me? He finally asked. The nine-tailed demon fox watched him for a very long time, and Naruto couldn't tell what was going on in those giant eyes. Understandably, there were no tells, no facial giveaways or emotions that a human might unconsciously reveal. It was an enormous mass of chakra taken physical form in the shape of a fox, after all. Then, the demon fox spoke. No, I might die, Naruto continued. He thought back to his fights, against those shinobi who so far outclassed him it wasn't even funny. I almost have. I know. If I die, what will happen to you? Naruto licked his dry lips. I don't know if things like you can die like we do, but shinobi don't think you can, that the tailed demons just reform somewhere else. Is that painful? Does it hurt? Yes. If you let me use your power, then I'll live, Naruto said. His fists were clenched, his knuckles whitened. Every part of his body felt tense. I have enemies that might kill me. Finally, he got another reaction of the fox. The giant beast shook, and the water rippled as a low, rumbling filled the room. The walls seemed to shake, the pipes rattled on the walls, and Naruto realized that the demon was laughing. Of that, you truly have no idea. The fox spoke, sounding like it was chortling. Its laughter died down after a few moments, and silence filled the air, save for the drip of water and the light rush of the demon's breath. Regardless, my answer remains. No. Why not? Naruto took a step forward, his face determined. I need to be able to protect my. Something moved in front of him and Naruto grunted. He struck back something with his kunai, the metal striking metal and producing a shower of sparks, but it looped around and wrapped around his leg. It was a tight grip, one that dug into his skin, and Naruto grunted. He looked down, his heart racing. It was a chain, a corroded, metal chain, made of the same blackish rust that he had seen back on the pipes. I told you not to step forward. The fox shifted, moving its head. I will answer your question. The chain around his leg tugged at him, and Naruto dug back on his heels. He flipped through a few hand seals, molding chakra, and the pipes on the wall began to shudder and squeal, shaking against their brackets. Naruto, almost finished casting a wind technique to slice away the chain, paused. In this place, that would be unwise. The fox said. Its crimson eyes stared down at him, showing absolutely nothing. There was no amusement, nor concern or anger, in its eyes. You shall not wield my power because in doing so you will unchain that which has been chained. What? Naruto asked, gritting his teeth as the chain pulled him closer and closer to the giant golden bars of the cage. Look down. Naruto did so, and his eyes widened. The chain was not dragging him to the cage, nor did it seem to be coming from it. Rather, right before the cage, there was a huge abyss, of cracked stone and concrete, leading down into blackness. As Naruto got closer and closer to it, he saw movement in there, something shifting in the pitch black. He struggled against the chain, and to his surprise it snapped. It reared back, as if a living thing, and retreated back into the abyss from where it had come. What is that? Naruto gasped, stepping back from the crevice. The fox shifted its gaze. That is your child. There was inflection in its voice now, something that sounded like disgust. That is what you have nurtured all of these years. It is the sum of your fear and hatred and anger and pain and sorrow. You have fed these into that pit, where it has taken hold and grown under your tender care. What? Naruto didn't understand, couldn't understand. There was a pain in his head, and he forced it back down. He took in a deep breath, forcing everything back down, calming himself, and the room shuddered. There was the sound of clanging chains, and Naruto stared at the abyss with horror. That is everything you hide from. That is everything that causes you pain. The fox continued. It is disgusting. It is foul. It is your legacy, the legacy of the human race, the greatest creation. The fox turned its large, crimson eyes back on Naruto, and there was condemnation in them. It is misery. Naruto looked away from the fox, and he looked away from the crevice. His head was hurting again. Listen. He shook his head. Listen. The fox was insistent. Naruto listened. There were voices coming from the black, tiny little voices that he could barely hear, but hear them he did. I'm cold. It hurts. There's so much pain. It hurts so much. Make it stop. Make the pain stop. Take it away. Why does it hurt? Help me. Please. Stop this pain. I hate them. I hate them so much. Fuck them all. We'll kill them. We'll tear them to fucking pieces. We'll kill them, and their families, and everybody they've ever loved. We'll burn their homes with their children inside. I'm so lonely. Where is everybody? Why do I sit in the dark? Help me. Please. Somebody. Anybody. There must be somebody who can love somebody like me. Please. Please. Why won't anybody love me? Naruto jerked back. That is why you cannot have my power, said the giant fox. For you are foul. You are diseased, Uzumaki Naruto. There is darkness in you that has taken root and grown fat off of your misery and my power. You have created this abomination, so close to where I could smite it, and yet so far. For that, Uzumaki Naruto, I hate you. The fox leaned forward, pressing its muzzle to the cage. I hate you. I loathe you. I despise you. Leave here, and never come back. Silence filled the room. Water dripped from the walls and the ceiling above. Naruto stood there, reflecting on the nine-tailed demon fox's words as the giant beast retreated back into its cage, disappearing from view. Then, he paused. Anger was welling up now. What did you just say, the part about it being fed off of your power? An eye cracked open in the darkness. Shinobi do this all the time, Naruto continued. His tone was quickening, his heart racing. He licked his lips. We repress. I'm told it's not healthy. But not everybody has a giant chain monster trying to, I dunno, eat them, do they? Naruto smiled, baring his teeth. This is your fault, he concluded. His voice was firm. If I'm that thing's father, then you're its mother. I created it, but you raised it and fed it. He spat to one side. Take some fucking responsibility. I did not ask to be put in this cage. And I didn't ask to be the one holding the key. Naruto retorted just as quickly. Both eyes opened now. You do hold the key. The fox came back into view. It stared at Naruto. There is another way. Free me. No, Naruto denied. Release the seal. Set me free. I will destroy this abomination. Never, Naruto promised quietly. Let me go. Give me my freedom. In return, I shall grant you the power that you want. There will be no enemy that could stand up to you. You can fight for your village. Naruto shook his head. You're stuck with me, the young Anbu said quietly. When I die, you'll die. If I live, you live. Look, I'll try to work on that, and he pointed to the crevice and the sounds of jingling chains. But, I'm going to need something in return. I see. The fox moved closer. It rested its paws on the ground and brought its muzzle right up to the bars of the cage. There is still one issue of concern. Observe. Naruto watched as a tendril of the red aura that surrounding the fox in the glowing haze rose off of the beast. They traveled towards the pipes that ran into the cage and entered it with a hiss of steam. The pipes rattled and grew hot, water hissing and spluttering, and Naruto could see a faint red shine begin to move across the room through the pipes. But then, as it left the cage, the chains rattled and dozens of them shot up. They wrapped around the pipes on the walls, and the metal groaned in protest. The red glow continued unimpeded, but the chains were swaying and bobbing in movements reminiscent of the suckling of a baby on a teat. As the red glow approached Naruto, he felt a surge of power flood his body, of red-hot chakra that whipped every muscle into frenzy, but his head suddenly was flooded with pain and hate and anger and sadness. He clutched it, grunting, but the sensation had already begun to fade, as well the unnatural vigor that had rejuvenated his entire body. It feeds off of my chakra as it leaves the cage, the fox said. It rested its paws on its legs. The chakra will not run out, it cannot run out. But, those chains corrupt everything they touch. When you take my power, you take a little bit of that which resides in that pit. That's my problem, Naruto said after a pause. He flexed his fingers, and smiled tightly. Besides, if I can do something to fix that thing, then I'll know that I have by using your chakra. The nine-tailed demon fox stared at Naruto for a very long time. The blonde Anbu wasn't sure how long had gone past, for he was lost in the glow of the inhuman eyes and the miasma of dark red power that surrounded the mighty fox. Very well, the fox finally said. I shall grant the use of my power. Thank you, Naruto said gratefully, and with a rush of relief. But make no mistake, the giant fox continued. That pit, this cage, the pipes, this is all symbolism. We are not truly here. These things represent ideas and concepts about you, and in that pit is no monster. There is nothing in there that did not come from you. Then what is it in there? Naruto asked quietly. The fox smiled, baring its teeth. It is the lonely child. It is the angry victim. It is the grieving friend. It is the hatful warrior. It is Uzumaki Naruto. It began to retreat into the darkness. Now go. How do I leave? Foolish boy. You already have. Naruto blinked, dazed. There was something on his head, a tag of paper yellowed and old. Before his eyes, it fell off, swaying gently in the wind and dropping into his lap. He picked it up, staring at the yellowing paper and the faded writing. Before his eyes, the paper began to crumble away into dust, and he let the wind blow it out from between his fingers. He took in his surroundings. He was sitting back on the grass in the field, deep beneath the Hokage's monument. The fires above him were casting a brilliant light all around him, warming him as the breeze brought in by the intricate system of vents tunneled in through the rock. Welcome back, somebody called. Naruto turned his head. Jiraiya was sitting on a nearby rock, one that hadn't been there before. The Sannin had a notebook in his hand, and he was scribbling something down. He hadn't looked up yet, and he briefly paused, placing the pen on his lip for a moment, before scribbling down something else. Then, he put the pen and notebook away. How did it go? Jiraiya asked cheerfully. I assume from the traces of demonic chakra that you made contact. I did, Naruto answered. He held a hand to his head, feeling a vestige of pain. And it went weird. Weirdly, Jiraiya corrected. Use your adverbs properly. Naruto just looked confused. Jiraiya ignored him, however, and adopted a serious expression. The changes in the man's demeanor, from cheerful to solemn, made Naruto sit up straighter. Tell me everything. Answer Naruto did. Jiraiya sat there, listening. Naruto half expected the man to be writing something down with his notebook, but the Sannin just sat there fiddling with his pen, listening attentively. When Naruto was done, the Sannin just sat there, thinking. He was quiet for a few minutes, letting Naruto sit back. The young Anbu found that he was rather anxious about how the legendary shinobi in front of him would react. Hey, Jiraiya uttered. He grinned, and ruffled Naruto's hair. Naruto visibly squirmed under the hand of the older shinobi. You did all right, kid. Now, let's see what you can do. Naruto nodded, and closed his eyes. The nine-tailed demon fox had resided in the sewers of his mind, but like the beast had said, that had just been a representation, a symbol. Now that he had been there once, he found that he could easily go there again. And he did. A river of tainted power surged into his veins. Every cell in his body became inflamed. His heart beat furiously, his veins surged with adrenaline and power, his muscles thickened, and his fingers flexed as his nails sharpened. Skin was drawn back, tightening against his bone, and this had the effect of extending his lips, his snarl ever prominent on his face. Overall, the physical changes were easy to handle. However, the mental and emotional changes that he went through made him cry out in pain, and he clutched his head. His head became full of whispers, the whispers of those that came from the pit, and the clang and rattle of chains filled his ears. Anger, rage, sorrow, pain, grief, loneliness, abandonment, they filled him up until he could barely think. He gasped and choked, swaying on his feet even as a shroud of crimson chakra enveloped him, surrounding him with miasma of heat and power. A single, swaying tail of the bubbling power formed up behind him. He jerked, placing both hands on his head, trying desperately to control himself. His mouth moved, whispering soundlessly at first, but getting ever louder. Stop it, 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 stop it. Naruto gasped and spat. He grimaced. I'm real, I'm here. Through all of this, Jiraiya stood back, his arms folded as he watched on stonily. It was only when Naruto lifted his now crimson gaze to stare hatefully at him did he move, and just in time, as the swaying tail of crimson power swung up from behind him and elongated, striking out at the Sannin in a manner reminiscent of a scorpion's sting. The white-haired Sannin jumped backwards, and the blow struck the ground. It cracked, and the dirt trembled underneath their feet. Jiraiya landed, and continued to watch Naruto carefully, but the young blonde had stopped, and was currently hunched over. Then, the miasma of chakra around him grew thicker and thicker, until it was like Naruto was completely cloaked in a haze of dark red energy. Hands clenched in his hair, Naruto brought him out, ripping out parts of his scalp, and he lifted his head back and screamed. It was the scream of the nine-tailed demon fox, and it reverberated around the training ground. Trees swayed underneath its force, the ground shuddered and the creek rippled. The wind was blown back and the grass flattened, and, for a single instant, the power around Naruto took form above his head, becoming that of a leering fox. Then it disappeared, and began to recede, and Naruto stopped screaming. He stood there, hunched over with both hands on his knees, as his features became more and more visible. Finally, with what seemed like a great deal of effort, he straightened up. Face twitching, he turned to face Jiraiya. I'm fine, Naruto said raspingly. There was an echo in his tone, something that came just a split second after he spoke. I've got this. It's okay. Jiraiya nodded. So I see, he said quietly. Now, let go of that power. I've seen enough. Naruto obeyed. I'll need some time to think, Jiraiya said. He slapped Naruto on the back, the boy wincing as the force of the blow made him stumble. Let's go chill out somewhere. Say, do you like hot springs? The very next morning, Naruto woke up early at 6 o'clock. He quietly left his room, entered the kitchen and prepared breakfast for Konohamaru and the Hokage. Then, dressed in his Anbu uniform, he left the Hokage's residence and made his way down to Training Ground 8, a large field reserved purely for the Anbu Corp. A man was standing there, waiting. He didn't have his mask on, so out of common courtesy, Naruto also took off his mask and clipped it onto his belt. Good morning, Naruto greeted, falling back onto his politeness. He had never met this man before. The man's dark eyes bore into his. I am Crow too, he said tonelessly. He reached behind his back and pulled out a sword. I have been instructed to work in improving your speed and close combat tactics. We shall begin. No ninjutsu. Then, in a blur of movement, the man darted forward, swinging the gleaming blade in a smooth arc. It would have taken off his head had Naruto not brought up both arms, blocking the strike with his forearm guards. His arms strained under the pressure. The man was far stronger than he looked, but Naruto dug in his heels and held his ground. He saw the follow-up kick coming, lowered his arms and hunched down, taking it with his elbows, but then Crow too abruptly ceased pushing with the sword, and Naruto lost his balance. He staggered, regaining his footing with ease but taking a moderate blow to the stomach. He skidded back, his heart racing. You are small, Crow too said dispassionately, and you are weak. You cannot match my strength. Block only when necessary. Parry when possible. Use my momentum against me. Evading is preferable. He leveled the blade at Naruto, and charged. Naruto was more ready this time, and he ducked the first swipe, and then rolled to the side to avoid the follow-up kick. He landed in a crouch, his hands gripping the earth, and as Crow came at him again, he hurled a fistful of dirt at the man's face. The man reflexively raised an arm and Naruto struck, rising up and scoring a quick strike in the man's stomach. Crow too remained expressionless. Good, he said. We will work on your conditioning your reflexes to a greater degree at first. There will be no need for ninjutsu. Once I believe you are fast enough, we will look at diversionary ninjutsu and tactics that will let you keep distance. Naruto nodded resolutely. Then, Crow charged again and Naruto met him head-on, parrying the blade to the side in a shower of sparks, his heart racing as adrenaline surged through him. By the end of the session, Naruto felt like he was wiped. He made his way down to Training Ground 1 and met with the Hokage, who stood in front of the burbling stream, reading over a scroll. The old man sensed his presence and rolled the paper up, tucking it into his white and red robes. Let us begin, Sarutobi said, and Naruto nodded. The third Hokage began lecturing as his student listened on avidly. Now, the dispel technique is very powerful, but don't assume that you shall win a fight with it alone. In order to counter a technique, you must understand how it works, and how it is shaped, and how it is formed, and how it reacts to external stimuli. Considering that the great villages hoard their secrets, this can quite troubling. Nonetheless, we shall work nullifying techniques that you are already familiar with. I have with me a list of ninjutsu, a mixture from all different elemental compositions. Study them. Pull each ninjutsu apart, look at its components and understand. My expectation is that you will be able to dispel each technique by the end of the month. Do you understand? Yes, Hokage-sama, Naruto nodded obediently. Then begin. He was still studying one of the ninjutsu scrolls, absently munching on a ration, when Jiraiya arrived. Luckily for Naruto, at least the man did not make as grandiose of an entrance as before. It was good thing that he didn't, for Naruto was still unsure on how he should present himself to the legendary shinobi. Jiraiya was a well-respected shinobi of Konoha, one of the best to have lived, and praised and renowned for his deeds in service to the village. That alone demanded that Naruto treated the man with respect. Even if he was odd. Even if he was annoying. Even if he wouldn't keep his bloody hands to himself. Gah! Naruto blurted out as a large hand came down on his blonde locks. He squirmed as his hair was ruffled, glaring up at the offender in dignity. He hadn't sensed anybody coming, and he had to calm his heartbeat as he saw Jiraiya staring down at him, grinning stupidly. Yo, brat. The Sannin said cheerfully. Naruto jumped to his feet, pushing away his irritation, and bowed his head politely. Good afternoon, Jiraiya-sama, he managed to say calmly, and with respect. Yet he couldn't stop the hand coming up to fix up his hair. Jiraiya watched him do that, a sparkle in his eye, and then plopped down right next to him. He placed his arm on his leg and rested his chin in his palm. He was looking over the scroll that Naruto was reading carefully, but after a few seconds he made a noise of disgust. How boring, he moaned. He reached into his red vest. Here, he said. Try this. Read page 32 out loud. It's the best part. Naruto took the proffered orange book curiously. Were these Jiraiya's personal notes? Maybe his journal, but then, wouldn't it be coded? He opened it up to the correct page and began reading. She moaned in pleasure, the warmth filling up her body from head to toe, as the handsome man rested his hands on her back, holding her close. Every curve of her body molded into his strong, firm chest, her bountiful bosom heaving with pleasure as the two forbidden lovers passionately kissed underneath the moonlight. Naruto read out, and trailed off. Go on, Jiraiya said with an encouraging grin. Trust me, it's going to get really good. He threw Naruto a thumbs up. Naruto eyed the book with confusion. Is this to help me with my Jinchuriki training, Jiraiya-sama? He asked, although he felt something like butterflies as his eyes scanned the page and they widened noticeably as he got to a specific bit. Gah! Jiraiya scoffed. He ruffled Naruto's hair again, ignoring the boy's squirming. Like I said. Boring. Naruto shrugged, and closed the book. He made to hand it back, but the Sannin was shaking his head. Keep it, the white-haired man said, and gave a giggle. It's an order. I want you to read that tonight. Is this to do with the second part of my training? Naruto ventured cautiously. Sure. Why not? Jiraiya confirmed. Suddenly, he paused, and stared down at Naruto suspiciously. Wait. You do know where babies come from, right? Naruto cocked his head. A penis is inserted into the vagina. There, semen is released from the testicles. In that semen, sperm cells move down. Okay. Jiraiya hushed him, and for a moment, he looked uncomfortable. Please stop. He regarded Naruto with a frown. You make everything so boring. Hey, want to visit the hot springs later? I'll show you what I mean. What? Naruto was confused. Jiraiya gestured to the book, cupped his chest and waggled his eyebrows. Naruto's eyes widened and he gaped. He could feel a flush of heat his cheeks and he almost stammered. His eyes darted around, looking for eavesdroppers, and he moved in. You can do that. The blonde boy whispered, sounding fascinated. You can, Jiraiya said, grinning broadly. He clapped Naruto on the back. We'll make a pervert out of you, kid. For now, though, let's talk about your training. Naruto nodded and composed himself. As you say, Jiraiya-sama, he said politely. TCH. You speak in such a boring manner, Jiraiya muttered. He mussed up Naruto's hair. The boy's eye twitched, but he otherwise held still. Here's the deal, kid. Every time you say something that makes me feel like I want to go to sleep, I'm going to do that. I apologize, Jiraiya-sama. Naruto trailed off with a hiss as Jiraiya mussed his hair again. The white-haired man was enjoying this. Naruto held in a glower and fell silent. Well, about your Jinchuriki training, Jiraiya trailed off, adopting a pondering expression. He rubbed his cheek thoughtfully. Yep, you suck at it. Naruto twitched. Excuse me, the hand came to mess his hair. Naruto gritted his teeth. With all due respect, Jiraiya-sama, how was that boring? Most kids say, what? And here Jiraiya spoke in a clearly exaggerated gruff voice, and not, excuse me. Like a pretty princess. Be a man. I'm 12, Naruto deadpanned. Jiraiya harumphed. Anyway, he said, and he mussed up Naruto's hair again. The blonde Anbu took it with resignation. Stop distracting me. I was trying to say something important. Naruto held his tongue, but the Sannin seemed to have the same horrible ability as the third Hokage to pull out the urge that made him want to scream at people and then put them on fire. Lots and lots of fire. As I was saying, you suck as a Jinchuriki, Jiraiya repeated himself. Look at you, you girl. You can't use the power because of all your emotional baggage. What a woman. Naruto was cocking his head, confused. I'm only following the standard Anbu procedures for dealing with emotional conflict, he said. And that wasn't boring, it was a fact. Hey, Jiraiya said with a grin, removing his hand. Still, we've got a couple of options. I thought about having you see a professional, but I kind of want to keep this hush-hush. The old man doesn't like it when I go around breaking S-rank secrets, and this particular training definitely counts. My emotional issues won't be a problem, Naruto began. He shuddered, and twitched as Jiraiya mussed up his hair. It was beginning to get painful. I'll deal with them. I just need practice, he continued between gritted teeth. And that's what we're going to do, Jiraiya concluded cheerfully. So get off your lazy bum, and let's get started. Naruto rose to his feet, placing his scroll and other assorted pieces of equipment away. The Sannin moved to a safer distance. Assume your chakra shroud, Jiraiya instructed. Naruto nodded, and went back to the Suiza, at least, touched upon the part of his mind where they were located, so to speak. He felt the terrible power course through his veins, and with it, the rush of terrible sensations and feelings that accompanied it. It took him a few minutes before he regained proper control of himself and stood up, shrouded in a haze of dark red chakra. It coated his skin, bubbling and hissing away, and he could feel the tail swaying behind him, like it was a third arm, an extension of himself. The world around him seemed both darker and brighter. The colors had been muted, and everything seemed to be coated in a haze of red, but at the same time everything felt more vibrant and clear. If it wasn't for the terrible mental conflict that was waging war in his head, Naruto could get quite used to this. Jiraiya was nodding. Good, he said. Slow, but good. Drop it, and try again. Naruto let go the power, and was silently relieved when the horrible feelings went away. We'll work on your speed in drawing out the power, Jiraiya said thoughtfully. Your enemies won't let you just stand there and gather power, and wow, I feel like a hypocrite when I say that. Naruto cocked his head. Excuse me, Jiraiya-sama. Then, he bit his lip as the man somehow cleared the distance and was striking Naruto on the head with the flat of his palm like he was a dog. Don't be boring, the Sannin chided. Naruto gritted his teeth. Anyway, once you can summon the power quickly, we'll work on looking at what you can do with it. We might spar. I prefer working hands-on, anyway. He ruffled Naruto's hair. Stop making faces. Naruto's eye twitched and he felt his fingers flexing. A rather high-pitched giggle threatened to escape him. He had fought against Tsunade, an S-rank shinobi and somebody that Jiraiya was supposed to be in the same league, but the prospect of facing Jiraiya in a spar, well, there was something satisfying about the thought. Naruto's training continued in this fashion for quite some time. He continued to work on his physical endurance and reaction times, and he expanded his repertoire of tactics to evade close combat shinobi, the greatest threat to a long-distance fighter such as himself. Crow 2 was replaced by Snake 9, who was replaced by Dog 6. The focused, one-on-one training, something that Naruto hadn't had a chance to do in a long time, went well. His prowess with the Dispel technique continued to grow. He pored over the 7 techniques, pulling each one apart and studying every aspect of it. Nature manipulation, shape manipulation, elemental composition, which of the tenketsu were used when molding the chakra for it. Every part of the technique was dissected and studied until Naruto felt he knew them like the back of his hand. And then, halfway through the month, he finally nullified the first of the techniques. The Earth Release, Rising Plateau, rose from the ground, and then Naruto, making the strange hand seal and molding chakra as he was instructed to do so, projected the inverted, negative chakra, at the very center for the Earth technique. Before his very eyes, it simply disappeared and collapsed in a pile of dust. Naruto was pleased, but then he got right back to work. There were 6 more to finish, after all. However, with one done, he was confident he could get it finished, especially with the help of his shadow clones. His training under Jiraiya was also reaping some good results. He could call upon the power of the 9-tailed demon fox in under 10 seconds now. However, he had found that with that much corrosive chakra pouring through his veins, it was almost impossible for him to mold chakra for his standard shinobi techniques. That said, under the shroud of the crimson power, Naruto found that his reflexes, physical strength and sheer speed had tripled, and the more he used the power, the stronger he became. To Naruto, his tactics any future fight seemed simple. Use long-range ninjutsu when fighting at range, keeping his distance between him and his enemy. If the enemy came in close, evade and keep them at bay while summoning the fox's power. Then, using his powers as a Jinchuriki, engage in close combat with superior speed and overwhelming strength to defeat his enemy. Perhaps one day, when sparring with Jiraiya, it might even work. His aggravating tendencies aside, the man hit like a brick and knew such a diverse range of techniques that it was almost impossible to land a hit even when Naruto really wanted to, because the Sannin was so goddamn annoying. He kept his cool, though, and that seemed to annoy the Sannin even more. Naruto took a deep-seated pleasure in watching the man scowl as he continued to be polite and respectful, doing it now more so to annoy the other shinobi than out of any real respect. Although he had kept the book hidden underneath his blankets with a low-grade explosive tag rigged on it just in case Konohamaru came snooping. It was an interesting read. At the end of the month, however, Naruto was called into the Hokage's office right after his personal training. He arrived in a quick body flicker and, sensing visitors, made sure he arrived in a crouch, kneeling before the third Hokage. It was important to show the proper respect, especially in front of foreign dignitaries. Excellent, the third Hokage said quietly. He stood by his window, staring out at the village. A pipe was tucked into his mouth, which he puffed on every so often. He has arrived. Stand, please. Naruto obeyed, standing up and quickly observing the office. There were 3 others present in the room. Baki, of Suna, a dark-skinned man with what seemed to be a giant hammer strapped to his back sporting a Kumo headband, and a slender woman that Naruto recognized as Kurotsuki, from Iwa. She gazed at him with her pupil-less eyes and winked. Uzumaki Naruto. The third Hokage turned to look at him. After consulting with the other great villagers, it has been decided that you shall be the proctor for the 3rd stage of the Chunin exams. Naruto stiffened. This is a very prestigious position, and you should be honored in the trust that both Konohagakure and the other great villages have placed in you, the Hokage continued. He eyed the representatives from the other villages. As representatives for your leaders, do you all agree with Konoha's decision to select Uzumaki Naruto as the proctor for the 3rd stage? Baki bowed his head, but kept his eye on Naruto even as he spoke to the Hokage. The 4th Kazekage accepts, Hokage-sama. The large, dark-skinned man dipped his head. The 4th Reikage accepts, Hokage-sama, he murmured in low, deep voice. Kurotsuki bowed her head but very slightly. The 3rd Chuchikage will accept the will of the other villagers, she said casually. She paused. I was meant to say that in clipped tones, okay, Hokage-sama. Sarutobi chuckled, and smoothed his goatee. I understand, he said warmly. Iwagakure accepts, however reluctantly. As a representative of Konoha, I also accept. Naruto raised a hand. Excuse me, Hokage-sama, he said quietly, but do I have to accept? Not at all, the Hokage said with a smile, and Kurotsuki visibly snickered. Sarutobi turned to the other representatives. I think we're done here. Thank you for arriving so promptly with your news. I wish your genin well in the upcoming exams. They all nodded and left the office. Naruto could sense the presence of multiple Anbu around them, although it wasn't like Sarutobi needed any help dealing with them. He hid his displeasure as he turned back to the old man, watching him as he sat back down in his chair. With all due respect, Hokage-sama, he began. You know, I find that when somebody begins a sentence, with all due respect, they usually are about to say something disrespectful, Sarutobi said with a chuckle. No, go on, he said, waving Naruto to continue. Why have I been given this job? Naruto asked bluntly. Ah, that's simple, Sarutobi said, smiling. It's because our village is weak. Naruto froze. Excuse me, Hokage-sama. Of course, we're not, Sarutobi continued. However, in the eyes of our competitors, we are reeling from a series of devastating blows. The Blitz put a dent in our forces, and while most of the repairs of our infrastructure have been completed, we lost some significant manpower during the attack. Make me some tea. Naruto moved to do so as the Hokage puffed on his pipe. The attack by the cult of Jashin also had a significant impact, with the short-term implications of a slowing in the logging industry, and the long-term implications of our troop movements, the Hokage continued. There is rising trouble along the border between the land of hot springs and the land of frost. Both are situated between us and the land of lightning, and the latter has not liked our incursion into the land of hot springs. Kitsune has been doing some good work then? Naruto asked as he made the tea. No, Sarutobi said quietly, and Naruto turned to look at him. The old man had a grim look on his face. The work that Kitsune and Alpha Platoon are doing is not good. However, it is quite necessary, and they are very effective. Naruto handed the cup of tea over to the Hokage, and then prepared to be barraged by boiling water. To his faint surprise, the Hokage did not do so, content to merely sip the tea and sigh in satisfaction. Which brings me back to my point, the old man said. We are perceived as weak or rather, weakened. I want to change that, both so our clients can see that we are still worthy of their investment, and so that our rivals can see that we are no wounded animal to be flocking over. To do that, I am going to use you. Naruto cocked his head. Naruto, you are going to be the face of this village for these exams, the third Hokage said. He smiled faintly. We are going to put your skills to good use. He reached into one of his drawers and pulled out a folder. Here, read this. Naruto took it and read it. When he was done, his eyebrows were raised. Is that why? He began. Partly, Sarutobi admitted. But it worked in well with my plans for continued development. Tell me, what do you think? Well, it's definitely showy, Naruto admitted. He scratched his head, thinking deeply. But I can do it. Excellent, the Hokage said. Now run that down to Yamanaka Inoiki, and then have him through the profiles of the attending feudal lords. I want to give them a show that they'll never forget. On the very day of the Chunin exams, two shinobi met. Sarutobi Hiruzen, the third Hokage of the village hidden in leaves, and Jiraiya of the legendary three stood on the Hokage's monument, staring down at the village. It was early in the morning and the stars were still out. The street lights were still on, and they twinkled in the darkness, even as the sun began to rise on the horizon. The third Hokage puffed on his pipe, looking out at his beloved village, while Jiraiya sat on the head of the second Hokage, watching the stars. Sarutobi lowered the pipe from his lips. It has been a productive month, he murmured. We are well prepared for the Chunin exams. The Chuchikage, Kazekage and Reikage will not find us wanting. I have to say, Jiraiya began. I don't like the idea of using Naruto as a showpiece. He's already getting enough attention as it is. He didn't look at the third Hokage while he was speaking. I don't like it, old man. You don't have to, Sarutobi rebuked quietly. Unfortunately, you truly don't have a say. I am his godfather, Jiraiya reminded. He folded his bulky arms. I would have thought that would have given me some sort of say. Sarutobi smiled gently. According to all of the legal documents, Uzumaki Naruto is a ward of the state and falls under my jurisdiction. He puffed on his pipe. Don't worry. He's become a fine shinobi. His parents would be proud. Minato would be, Jiraiya said. Kushina, here he winced, well, we'll be hearing it when we finally cark it. She never liked the business of raising child prodigies. She wasn't impressed with what I did to Minato. You turned him into the fourth Hokage, a man still respected and feared to this day, Sarutobi said. There is no shame in that. Tell that to the survivors of the bloodied plains, Jiraiya said somberly. Don't get me wrong. I loved Minato. He was a fantastic shinobi, and a kind and gentle man. But what he did after Obito died, the hundreds he killed, that was the work of a monster. That was the work of somebody who did what needs to be done, Sarutobi rebuked none too gently. He turned, puffing on his pipe. That is what a Hokage does. They do what needs to be done to protect their village. Nothing more, nothing less. And that includes raising a 12-year-old boy into believe he's nothing more than a weapon for the village, Jiraiya observed. There was no accusation in his voice, it was just an observation. He is a weapon, Sarutobi said. He took a deep breath. As much as it pains me to say, Uzumaki Naruto is a sword of Konoha, ready to be plunged into our enemies. That is the nature of Jinchuriki, the fate of the prodigy, the state of this world. The Sannin let out a loud sigh. What a fucked up world we live in, he murmured. Sarutobi smiled. You have become very idealistic, Jiraiya, he said, and there was something like pride in his voice. But, then it hardened as the Hokage continued. But this village cannot be run on idealism. It must be run through pragmatism and pessimism. Jiraiya interrupted. His face had taken on a hard look, his brow set into place and his jaw locked. Our world will not change unless we change our attitudes. Our world has already changed, Sarutobi countered. He put down his pipe. Nonetheless, this is not the time or the place to once again argue over this matter. Let us focus on more important things. Naruto. Jiraiya let out a deep sigh. He's a mess, old man. You've been good for him, and you can get him to lighten up and express himself. But other than that, he clams up and runs his little, quiet and polite, routine. From what I can tell, there's still a lot of stuff he's struggling to cope with, all the way back to the Blitz. There was a long pause, only interrupted by the squawks of the birds as the sun continued its slow rise on the horizon. The sky was lightening, the stars fading away, and the sounds of businesses and workers stirring began to fill the village. Can you help him? The third Hokage asked after a moment. Maybe, Jiraiya shrugged. He chuckled. He managed to plant his foot in my face the other day. Plus, I think he's really developing a taste for my book series. Sarutobi sighed, and closed his eyes in resignation. It will be on your head if Tsunade finds out, he warned. She's quite fond of the boy, you know. He gets on well with her. He looks a lot like Nawaki, Jiraiya said quietly. And he's the same age. Regardless, Naruto has done well in making the connections he has, Sarutobi said. He stroked his goatee. He is a sword, yes, but one day he might become the banner. I thought that was your plan, Jiraiya admitted. He stood up, brushing off his pants. When do you plan on retiring? I would like to wait until Naruto is 17, Sarutobi admitted. He took a deep breath. It's the same age I was appointed, so there is precedence. Naruto will need to keep growing in strength, but I do not worry about that. He has learned over 30 different techniques, and is proficient in all of them. His collaboration techniques are especially powerful, far beyond any other shinobi in the village. He has learned the first stage of the Titan summoning technique, he's developing his skills with the Dispel technique, and has made good progress with his Jinchuriki training. He will have the strength by then. Have you considered introducing him to Fuinjutsu? Jiraiya asked curiously. He's done some rudimentary training in it, but it is not his strongest area. Sarutobi chuckled. No offense intended for poor Naruto, but his intelligence does not extend far in that field. Still, I would like to show him some of the second Hokage's space-time techniques. Mastery over even one of them would be useful. He stopped to take a puff on his pipe. What I truly worry about is his reputation, Sarutobi continued. He is a Jinchuriki. There is already stigma attached to the label, especially with the actions of the fourth Mizukage, the only Jinchuriki to be made a Kage. No, Naruto must be a known quantity. He has garnered much respect from the village due to his role in the Blitz, true, but that will fade in time. He must be seen as the best choice. Jiraiya didn't say anything. Then, he began to walk away. Before he left, however, he stopped and turned his head. You've done a good job raising a soldier, and a sword, and somebody who could probably become Hokage one day, he admitted. But don't forget that he's also a human and a Jinchuriki. You can't bind him to the village with duty alone. He needs bonds. My advice: you put him in a team and you send him out on some light missions. Let him mingle more with the other shinobi. Let them get to know him. It'll be good for him. He left then, disappearing in a flash of movement, and leaving the third Hokage on top of the monument with his thoughts. He continued to smoke his pipe, letting the cool morning breeze ruffle his robes. Jiraiya was right. Perhaps, when the Chunin exams were done, he would look at combining the Anbu that Naruto had worked with during the Blitz. They seemed to mesh well, and they certainly regarded Naruto as somebody worthy of respect. Except perhaps, this time, Naruto could take a leadership role. He would need to become used to it, after all. Sarutobi Hiruzen stood there alone, puffing on his pipe and plotting in preparation of times to come. The 30th International Chunin exams were being hosted in Konoha, the village hidden in leaves. The first and second stages had already been completed, and now people wide and far flocked to the village in order to watch the third and final stage. The third stage was being held in the dome of the Regal Flame, a large arena stadium that had been built at the western edge of the village. It had come through the Blitz quite well, and had been spruced up preparation of the event. Currently, the stadium was full. Every seat had been filled, and the audience waited anxiously for the commencement of the third stage. The arena was a large rectangle, 200 meters in length and 100 meters in width. Large, study walls scaled over the dusty ground, at least 15 meters tall. Behind them were the first rows of seats. These lower levels circled the entire arena, dozens of rows for the common people. Merchants, civilians, tradespeople and locals filled this area, snacking on their foods and waiting restlessly. Beyond that were the more luxurious seats, the boxes and floors reserved for the wealthy and for those with status. The nobles sat there, dressed in their fine robes and holding the delicate, golden binoculars. Above them were two boxes, built right at the very top of the stadium. Side by side, they contained the thrones for the feudal lords and the seats for the leaders of the 5 great hidden villages. The wall behind them had been covered with a giant white cloth, and the seats were currently emptied. At that particular moment, Naruto was standing just in one of the passages leading into the arena. His heart was racing. It took time and some considerable effort to calm his nerves. He had done a lot of things for his village. He had fought. He had bled. He had killed. However, they had never made him speak out in front of so many people. There were thousands, and the very thought of it, strangely, was more terrifying than fighting against an S rank. Still, he did his best to settle his nerves and reviewed his speech again. Then, he crumpled it up into a little ball, took a deep breath, and walked into the light. The sun was blinding, and Naruto blinked, squinting against the glare. The audience, chatting and laughing loudly, began to whisper and mutter to each other as Naruto appeared in the arena. He ignored them, keeping his stride steady and focused as he made his way to the center. Clearing his throat, he turned on the microphone in his hands. He was acutely aware of the thousands of stares being directed his way as the noise began to dim and people stared down at him expectantly. Suddenly, the speech he had prepared was gone, and he swallowed nervously. "Yo!" Naruto greeted into the microphone. Then, he resisted the urge to slap himself in the head. "Yo, really?" He was starting to sound like Kakashi. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes and suddenly decided he didn't care. He was the one down here in the front, and he would say whatever the hell he wanted to. Except, anything that could be construed as sedition. "My name is Uzumaki Naruto," Naruto continued, and he found that he was unconsciously adopting the somewhat slow drawl of his former captain, Hitaki Kakashi. It was easier, actually, to fall back onto the mannerisms of somebody he knew didn't give a damn what people thought about him. "I'm the proctor, and this is 30th International Chunin exams." He paused. There was something else. "Everybody please rise for the feudal lords," Naruto commanded. The sounds of scuffing feet and rustling fabric filled the stadium as the audience stood, and the final mutterings and chatter died. The stadium descended into silences. Somewhere in the background, some royal music began to play. From the loudspeaker came the sound of a stern, serious voice, introducing the foreign dignitaries and the cage of the other villagers. From the land of lightning, escorted by a fourth raikage of the village hidden in clouds, we have Lord Takeda, of the Royal Court of Lightning. The fourth raikage appeared on the stadium. He was a large man, massive, somebody to rival Jiraiya. His white coat was opened in a casual display, revealing his thick, bulging muscles. He wore a gleaming belt of gold. Next to him stood a man barely half his size, a slender dark-skinned man wearing a pair of elegant glasses. He sported a small beard, and wore a loose-fitting robe and a dark-colored cloak. The audience burst into applause, the visitors from the land of lightning prostrating from their spots in the crowd. The fourth raikage escorted him to his throne-like seat, and then once the feudal lord was seated, walked over and took his own seat on the neighbor balcony. Next, from the land of wind, escorted by the Golden Storm, the fourth kazekage of the village hidden in sand, we have Lord Ushugi, of the Imperial Sovereignty of Wind. The fourth kazekage appeared. Dressed in the robes of the cage, he was completely covered from head to toe. His blue and white robes fluttered as he walked behind the Lord Ushugi, who wore a royal purple cloak over his robes, and covered his hat with a purple turban. He sported a small beard, and he looked displeased about something. The kazekage did not seem particularly happy for his part either, however, and the two parted ways quickly. From the land of earth, escorted by Onoki, the third Chuchikage of the village hidden in rock, we have Lord Toyotomi, of the Manchu dynasty. The third Chuchikage appeared, hovering, of all things, behind his feudal lord. He was a very short, old man with a triangular beard and a mustache. He had thick eyebrows, and he almost looked comical with his bald head and his big red nose. However, he was a kage who had lived as long as the third Hokage, one who had encountered the legends of Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Madara. He wore a green and yellow coat with a red collar, and it covered most of his body as he floated there. He hovered behind Lord Toyotomi, a man twice as tall, who sported a very prominent, grey beard and moustache. His eyes had dark marks underneath them, and he wore a tight-fitting robe. He sat in his seat and the Chuchikage floated to his own. Lastly, from the land of fire, escorted by Sarutobi Hiruzen, the third Hokage of the village hidden in leaves, we have Lord Shirasagi, the white heron of the royal court residing in the land of fire. If their crowds had been clapping politely before, now they exploded in raucous applause. The third Hokage appeared, dressed in his red and white robes of the cage, standing behind the feudal lord. The man was just like Naruto, remember, tall, pasty, thin, and hidden behind his fan. Sarutobi led the man to his seat, and then took his own on the other balcony. As soon as he had left, there was a flicker of movement and 2 guards appeared behind each feudal lord. Naruto recognized the robes of the 12 guardians flanking the Fire Lord. Naruto waited until some of the applause had died down, and then held up his hand. The crowd began to quieten as the attention was focused back on him. The international Chunin exams are held every 6 months, Naruto began. Firstly, we are here to demonstrate the prowess of the shinobi villages to the people that they serve you, the prospective clients and customers. You will see some outstanding feats today. Hand-to-hand combat and skills with the sword and the shield are things you may have seen before, but today you will see the exotic arts of the shinobi of illusions and techniques that bring about fire and water and lightning. Watch these and remember, these powers are at your disposal. Naruto paused, and took a deep breath. Secondly, we are here because of them. He turned, and brandished his arm at the other side of the arena. In the time that the feudal lords had been seated, 12 genin had marched out onto the grounds and stood before the crowds. They are the genin of the hidden villages, the upcoming shinobi who represent our best and our brightest. We are here to see if they are ready, to see if they have what it takes to gain the rank of Chunin. Let's give them a round of applause. The crowd exploded, roaring and yelling down encouragements and sometimes booing. The genin stood there, sometimes shifting nervously on their feet. Naruto saw Konohamaru standing at the back, looking very small amidst his taller peers, and his lips twitched. Now, Naruto began, but the audience was too loud. He tapped on the microphone, and waited until they had quietened down. Let's talk about the exams. This is the third and final stage of the exams. At the beginning, there were over 150 contenders. We are down to 12. These are the best. Today, they will be fighting in a tournament, in a series of one-on-one battles. The genin have already been told who their opponents are, and they have had a month to prepare. Expect to see some cunning strategy in play here today, ladies and gentlemen. He paused. However, he waited. The crowd quietened with anticipation. Naruto took a deep breath and smiled. However, Konoha has decided to do things a little differently this year, Naruto continued, his voice lowered. There were murmurs from the audience, and the genin themselves looked confused and anxious. Chunin must be strong, they must be smart, and they must look underneath the underneath. Most importantly though, Chunin must be able to adapt to changing circumstances. He let that sink in. Those that are set in their ways are destined to fail with them. He looked at each genin in the eye. Some of them, like Gaara of the Sand, looked totally uninterested, arms folded and barely even registering the crowd. Others, like Uchiha Sasuke, stared back at him with determination. Then, Naruto looked back at the audience. Does everybody see the covered wall behind the seats of the cage and the feudal lords? Thousands of heads and necks were turned and craned. At Naruto's cue, the piece of cloth covering the wall in the booth was pulled off, revealing a giant spinner. It was divided into 5 sections, each a different color, and each bearing a symbol of one of the elements. Some of the crowd went, ooh, while many others muttered in confusion. The feudal lords themselves looked intrigued. The cage, who had been informed beforehand, had no reaction. On the spinner wheel that you see, there are 5 symbols, Naruto continued. They are the symbols for the elements of water, fire, wind, earth and lightning. Before each match, that spinner will be spun, and the genin prospects will be battle in the conditions of that element. Naruto turned to look at the genin, many who looked shocked. Genin, he called. Are you ready? Some nodded, many merely hardened their faces. Audience, are you ready? The audience went wild, and Naruto gave a genuine smile. Then, he continued over the din, once the feudal lords have given their formal blessing, we'll start. The crowd began to chant, a rising din that echoed through the stadium. The ground quivered as feet were stomped, hands slapped and arms waved. Naruto could feel the excitement of the crowd wash over him. His own heart was racing, his blood pumping, and he watched as large wooden frame was brought out before each of the cage by a shinobi wearing white. A large, brass bell hung from the frame, and the first feudal lord picked up the striker. He hit the bell, and a loud gong resonated throughout the arena. Then he passed it back to the shinobi in white, who bowed, and moved to the next lord. Another strike. Another gong. And another. And another. As the last gong rung through the air, the ground rumbled, and all over Konoha, bells began to gong. There was a flash of light, and the air was suddenly filled with lightning techniques, flashes of blue and purple and green, amidst a series of detonating explosive tags. Confetti rained down upon the audience, who surged and stamped and hollered with all of their might. Naruto lowered his microphone, raised an arm. Barrier squads. He yelled out. All across the perimeter of the arena, squads of Konoha's Sealing Corps got into position. 12 teams of 5 shinobi sat beneath their seals and channeled their chakra. Before the eyes of thousands, a transparent dome of blue light covered the top of the arena, leaving Naruto and the genin trapped inside. Once it was done, Naruto heaved a great sigh and turned to the genin. In a flicker of movement, he appeared before them. The rules are simple, said Naruto, his voice deadly serious. Outside interference is strictly forbidden. You will fight your opponent one-on-one. The first one to be incapacitated will be eliminated. The use of deadly force is permitted, however. I will intervene if I decide that a fight's over, and there is a clear victor. He paused. Then, he channeled his chakra, folding it back upon itself thrice, and let the resulting pressure explode from his tenketsu. The air around him suddenly shimmered, and the dirt and rock beneath his feet cracked. The genin gasped, many become frozen, others taking defensive stances. Naruto saw Sasuke tighten his fists and Gaara stare at him with wide, excited eyes. Let me be clear, Naruto continued. His face was blank, and he was sporting a polite smile, as if talking about the weather. In this arena, I am the ultimate authority. It's not the cage. It's not the feudal lords. It's me. Once I say a match is over, it's over. If I tell you to stop, you stop. If you don't, he layered his chakra 5 times something painful, and it made his tenketsu burn and his nerves scream in protest. None of it appeared on his face as he brought the new pressure down on the genin. If you don't stop, I'll stop you myself. Then the pressure was gone. One of the genin had actually fallen, somebody from Taki, and he clambered back to his feet, his face pale. Please understand what I have just said, Naruto finished quietly. Genin, back to your balcony. The genin left and Naruto sighed. He was doing a lot of that today. He leapt back to the center of the arena and turned the microphone on. We are about to begin, he called out. He pulled out a piece of paper and glanced down at it. The first match will be Taka Kohei of Iwa against Sho of Kumo. Genin, please stand in the designated circles. The 2 genin appeared on either end of the arena. Sho was a tall, slender dark-skinned boy, older than Naruto by a few years. He had a series of spears strapped to his back, and he wore a metal buckler on his left wrist. Kohei was about the same age. He was bulky though, with thick arms and squinty eyes. There was intelligence behind him though, and cunning. They stood there as Naruto turned to the cage's booth. I invite each of the feudal lords to stand and spin the wheel, or send a representative to do so in your place, Naruto said. As this is Lord Shirasagi's domain, it's only fitting that he has first spin. The Fire Lord flapped his fan madly and practically leapt from his seat in excitement. He seemed to be giggling and he waved out to the crowd, who yelled and cheered in praise and adoration. He went up to the spinner and, in full view of the entire stadium, placed his hand on a spoke and spun it. The wheel spun as far as Naruto knew, it was unbiased, and after a few moments, it slowed and came to a rest on the red section. The symbol for fire stared back at him, and Naruto smiled. And it's fire, Naruto drawled. He eyed the genin with a small smile. That'll be fun for you lot. They didn't seem to think so, judging their faces. The crowd roared in expectation. Genin, do not move, the blonde boy advised. If you move, you might die. He made a hand seal and several shadow clones appeared around him. They darted away, towards the different groups of the Sealing Corps, who let them through the barrier. Then, they turned and each flipped through a series of hand seals. Naruto did the same, and the air around the arena began to ripple. The ground rumbled and shuddered, little rocks rattling on the ground, and the crowd grew quiet with anticipation. They didn't have to wait long. Before their eyes, the earth beneath the feet of the 2 genin rose. Both of them almost lost their balance, their eyes wide, as a large plateau rose beneath them, pushing them up towards the sky. Smaller columns of rock and stone also began to rise around them, some higher and some lower, until they all settled at least 5 meters off the ground, some much higher. Then the next techniques took effect. The ground beneath the pillars cracked, and smoke and steam began to rise into the air. Under the guidance of the shadow clones, giant columns of flame rose up into the air with deafening roars. They circled all of the pillars, licking away at the earth harmlessly, sustained by the shadow clones at the perimeter of the arena. After a few moments, the entire arena seemed to be alight, although there was very little smoke rising into the air. "And there's your fire," Naruto said. He felt a bit of enjoyment as the crowd, bedazzled and amazed, surged with movement, many of the spectators jumping out of their seats to crane their heads downwards for a better look. Naruto turned to the genin, who eyed the flames grimly. "For the record, these flames, while hot, are not immediately fatal," Naruto said, much to the Kumo genin's obvious relief. "If you fall into them, it's going to hurt, but it's definitely not something you have to rule out of any strategies or tactics you're thinking of. However, if you stay in them for too long, you will die, so it's been decided that if any genin stays in the flames for more than 10 seconds, I will call the match against you. Understand?" Both genin nodded. "Genin, fight." Kohei, the Iwanin, immediately clapped his hands together. Then, he slammed his hands in the ground. With a grunt, exertion visible on his face, the Iwanin pulled back his burly hands from the earth, and as they came out, Naruto could see that they were covered in stone. With a nasty grin, Kohei flexed his muscles and with a sudden whoosh, small, hooked spikes shot out from all around the gauntlet of rock. An interesting earth technique, Naruto thought to himself. He stood on one of the taller, narrower pillars, staring down at the genin intently, ignoring the cries and yells of the crowd. As he watched Kohei take a running leap over the flames and onto the plateau where the Kumo nin stood, his mind was already tearing apart that technique and coming up with ways to counter it just in case. The Kumo nin, darted backwards as Kohei advanced and he skillfully avoided the first swipe. The Iwanin was twice as big as him and looked to be far stronger, but with his bulky frame it would have been easy to assume that Kohei was slow. He was not. He darted around Sho in a flurry of hand-to-hand combat, handling the undoubtedly heavy gauntlets around his hands as if they were boxing gloves. After a few moments, Sho grunted as Kohei landed a devastating punch to his stomach, and he collapsed to the ground. Naruto stood there, and he did not call the match. A moment later, Kohei spun around and hunched up, bringing his gauntlets to shield his face as the Sho's crumpled form exploded in a puff of smoke. Using the body switch technique to escape to the other plateau, Sho snatched one of the spears off of his back and hurled it forward with great speed. The whistling in the air had given it away, however, and Kohei successfully blocked it with his rocky gauntlets. Sho was undeterred, however, and continued hurling his spears. Each one was blocked, landing uselessly on the ground as Kohei advanced, undeterred. It wasn't a bad strategy for Sho make some distance and pelt the enemies with weapons, but there were only so many spears one could strap to a body, and the Kumo nin had soon run out except the one in his hands. Then, unexpectedly, Sho took running and leapt off over the flickering flames. He landed in a crouch, spear ready, and met Kohei on with an elegant twirl. Kohei batted it away with his hands, but Sho spun around him, slashing at him again and again with surprising ferocity. For few moments, it seemed like Kohei was being forced backwards. Then, the Iwanin spotted an opening and he raised his hands. There was a loud crack and suddenly the rocky gauntlets exploded outwards, bombarding the other genin with a shower of sharp debris. Sho was struck several times, hissing in pain. He planted his spear in the ground and jumped back as Kohei slammed his hands back into the earth, creating another set of gauntlets for him. "Ah," Naruto murmured to himself, his voice lost over the din around him. So that was what the Kumo nin had apparently intended all along. He smiled. "I see." Sho had landed on his feet, apparently defenseless now that he had lost his last weapon, but his hands were flying through a set of hand seals, and as Kohei stood, wielding a brand new set of rocky gauntlets, the Kumo nin finished his technique. To Kohei's obvious horror, he suddenly realized that he was standing in the middle of a circle created by Sho's fallen spears and they were beginning to crackle and spark. There was a sudden pause as Kohei froze, and then, in a flash of lightning and a boom that sounded like thunder, electric bolts surged off the hafts of each of the spears and slammed into him. Kohei writhed on his feet, the earth elemental chakra in his gauntlets cracking and breaking apart underneath the power of the lightning technique. Sho kept it up, his hands frozen in place on the serpent seal. So focused upon his target, he did not see the ground behind him cracking, but then Kohei jumped up out of it, just as the earth clone crumbled apart, the illusion fading. Sho didn't stand a chance. Kohei swung a meaty fist and struck the slender dark-skinned boy off of his feet. The crowd surged, but a loud, "Ooh," rose up as the Kumo nin fell into the fiery pit surrounding the pillars of rock. Naruto was staring intently, and he began counting. Kohei was also waiting, his squinty eyes darting around the arena, not letting his guard down. When Naruto reached 10, he made a hand seal. Dispel. The fires around them were extinguished in a heartbeat, revealing blackened soil and a rather charred, unconscious genin lying on the ground. Naruto turned on the microphone, tapped it several times and brought it up to his face. "Winner, Kohei of Iwa," he called. Kohei pumped his fists into the air, reveling in the applause and the praise, while Naruto jumped down to check on Sho. The boy had a nasty gash on his head. Naruto was sure he could see traces of bone underneath the blood, and he signaled for the medical squad to come and take him away. Then, as Kohei left the arena, and made a hand seal and dispelled the giant pillars of earth, they collapsed into a pile of dust. "Will Kankuro of the sand and Konohamaru of the leaf enter the arena?" Naruto called out. The two genin arrived, and they stood on scorched, barren ground, eyeing each other. Konohamaru was trying to look intimidating, but Naruto had to stifle a laugh at how badly he was failing at it. Kankuro didn't seem to be very threatened, either. The taller teenager was eyeing the 8-year-old boy with disdain, shaking his head and muttering to himself. Naruto watched on, feeling a flicker of concern. Then, it was the Earth Lord's turn to stand up and spin the wheel. He did so, and the audience watched as the spinner span round and round, finally coming to a stop on the blue section. "And that makes water," Naruto called out. Good. Water was scarce in the land of wind, so Konohamaru would probably have more experience dealing with enemies around water, especially taking his mission to the land of waves into account. Kankuro, on the other hand, would have limited experience, but that didn't mean he would be useless. Naruto created some new Shadows clones, and together they performed the techniques. The ground beneath Kankuro and Konohamaru rose, pushing them above the arena floor, while at the same time, a gushing tide of water exploded from a series of buckets of water, riding from the edge of the arena and surging in to fill the gaps between the plateaus. It was much like how the fire arena had been, except there were a lot more tactical options with water than flame. Naruto raised his hand. "Genin, fight!" he shouted, bringing it down. Konohamaru was immediately on the offensive. His hands flipped into a series of signs, his chest bulged, and he spat out a searing ball of flame. It tore through the ground and soared over the water, which boiled and hissed as the fireball passed. Kankuro dodged it, and moved forward, coming in closer for hand-to-hand combat. It was a good strategy, especially considering the obvious height and strength advantage that the Sunanin had over the young boy. However, Konohamaru hadn't been wasting his time over the past month, and Naruto was surprised as the young Sarutobi brat dodged and evaded each of the hits. He was certainly more agile, but he lacked raw strength. Some of his hits even landed on the Sunanin, but they didn't look like they hurt much. Finally, Konohamaru was able to disengage and he jumped back, throwing a fistful of shuriken to cover his escape. It was only meant to be a diversionary tactic, but to the young boy's obvious surprise the shuriken caught Kankuro in the chest. The boy looked briefly stunned behind his face paint and, gargling and choking, he fell to the ground on one hand, breathing noisily. Konohamaru was frowning, and the boy glanced up at him, but Naruto refused to acknowledge him and kept on watching stonily, his arms folded. The young Sarutobi cautiously approached the fallen Sunanin, a kunai in hand. Naruto wanted to shake his head. The brat should have kept pelting the Sunanin with weapons until he fell, but Konohamaru hadn't seen through the act or the switch. Naruto wasn't surprised when Konohamaru gave an involuntary shriek as Kankuro suddenly lunged at him. The creaking, unreaving puppet was quick to strike, a large, pointed spike shooting out from its mouth. It was only by luck that Konohamaru managed to avoid it, tripping over his long scarf at the last second as he staggered back. An instant later, a chest plate on the puppet opened and Senbon zipped through the air. Konohamaru rolled over the Senbon, striking where he had been half a second later, and palmed a couple of spheres. There was a flash of light as the smoke bombs detonated and the puppet paused in its movements. Konohamaru took the time to roll into the water and disappeared underneath the surface. Naruto let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding and uncrossed his arms. Kankuro had come out of hiding throwing off a blanket that he blended in with the earth around him and standing up. Even Naruto was impressed the boy had somehow managed to put an illusion on his puppet that had fooled even him for a few moments. The smoke drifted away just as Konohamaru climbed out of the water on the other side of the arena, panting. He staggered to his teeth, drenched, and looked over his shoulder, glaring. Kankuro was shaking his head. Give up, he called out. I really don't want to go home saying I belted up a little kid. Why don't you give up? Konohamaru shouted. He rubbed a bloodied lip that he must have gotten when falling, and gave the other boy a cocky grin. I'm Sarutobi Konohamaru, and I don't give up. Fine. Kankuro sighed. He moved his hands and the puppet came to life, rattling loudly as its disjointed limbs flayed about around it. Just remember that I gave you a chance. You're the one who needed the chance. Konohamaru shouted, and he sped through some hand seals. Naruto's eyes widened. No way. Sarutobi couldn't have let that little brat. Summoning technique. Konohamaru cried, slamming his hand on the ground. There was a puff of smoke and a monkey appeared, no larger than Konohamaru himself. A monkey. Naruto heard Kankuro mutter to himself. It chittered for a few moments, gazing around the arena, and then turned to Konohamaru. What's up, bro? It said in a somewhat squeaky voice. What it you doing? Where are we? Is it fun? How can I help? Ooh, is that water? Why is there water? Are we going swimming? This is the Chunin exams, Konohamaru said determinedly. And I need you to help me do that move. The monkey cocked its head. Sure, it said cheerfully. Are you ready now? Hang on a sec, Konohamaru said. He made some more hand seals and slammed his hand down on the ground. From the earth rose a small wall of rock, clearing the top of Konohamaru's head by no more than a foot. It was a lackluster technique, but the fact that Konohamaru had demonstrated the ability to use two different elemental types at his age was impressive. What are you doing? Naruto murmured to himself, his eyes narrowed. Kankuro had moved his puppet, and it was firing a hail of senbon and kunai from various compartments from the other side of the arena. The wall blocked them all, but it was already cracking underneath the bombardment. Then, the monkey grabbed Konohamaru up by the leg and began to spin him around. Naruto stared. What? He deadpanned. Konohamaru was spun faster and faster until he became no more than a blur of blue scarf and green jacket. Naruto's mouth was visibly open, and he stared at the scene incredulously. What the hell was that? From his side of the arena, Kankuro couldn't see anything and as such, had no idea what was going on. Gee go! Konohamaru managed to shout. The events happened in an instant. The monkey let go of Konohamaru and disappeared in a puff of smoke, a transformation technique. There was a puff of smoke around Konohamaru's head. A second later Naruto caught a glimpse of a strange, somewhat antiquated metal helmet before the boy slammed into the wall of earth and broke through it. What the? Kankuro said. All the Sunanin saw was an extremely fast blur shooting at him. He raised his hands to move his puppet, but the stream slammed into it and the puppet shattered under the force of the blow. Wooden shards rained to the ground, the puppet falling to useless pieces. An instant later, Konohamaru slammed into Kankuro was an audible crunch. The Sunanin was sent flying under the force of the powerful blow and was sent spinning into the arena wall. He slammed into it, the stone around him cracking and splintering, and fell to the ground. Konohamaru picked himself up from where he had fallen after striking Kankuro, looking extremely nauseous. He burped, and hiccuped. Did we get him? He slurred. On his head, an eye appeared on the helmet. We totally got him. The transformed monkey squealed. Awesome, Konohamaru said woozily. Naruto closed his mouth and went to check on Kankuro. The boy was knocked out cold, and despite the hilarity and stupidity of the move, a blow with an adamantium helmet had no doubt caused some serious internal injuries. He waved over the medical squad, shaking his head in wonder. Winner, Konohamaru of Konoha, he called out. The audience had been silent ever since Konohamaru had unleashed his move. There was a beat after Naruto's announcement, and then they exploded in a roar of laughter and cheers. Konohamaru beamed, scratching the back of his head even as he kept swaying on his feet. The shock to his head probably hadn't done his brain cells any good, but Naruto wryly thought that the boy probably lacked a little in that department anyway. Right. The next match is between Sasuke of Konoha and Yuzu of Iwa. Naruto called out amidst the laughter, still shaking his head in bemusement. The rest of the fights in the round 1 were fairly simple for the most part, and did not last long. Uchiha Sasuke completed dominated his opponent, his Sharingan seeing through the enemy's genjutsu immediately. It was a bad match-up for the Iwanin, and although the girl tried a series of smoke bombs to shield herself from the Sharingan's gaze, the arena of wind saw that strategy literally blown away. The forceful gales made it almost impossible for her to navigate, but Sasuke could see the currents and eddies and knew where to go. Before the Iwanin could make a play for it underground, Uchiha Sasuke had slipped behind her and placed a kunai at the edge of her neck. She had spun around to retaliate, but then Naruto had called the match in Sasuke's favor. The round after that saw Hyuga Neji pitted against a Kumo nin. Naruto knew of the history of the between Kumo and the Hyuga clan, and was not surprised to see Neji arrive with his jaw locked and his face set with stony, cold fury. It was shorter than the last fight. The arena had been locked with on earth, and large spikes jutted from the ground all over the place. Precise footing was essential here, but in the end, it didn't matter much. The Kumo nin had not accounted for Neji's speed, and was unprepared when the Hyuga had surged forward. The next few moments would see Neji brutally dismantle the Kumo nin with his powerful yukan, finger taps slamming into every vital area and sending the poor boy to the ground, twitching and moaning. The second last fight of the round saw a shinobi from the new hidden village of Sound take on a genin from Kusa amidst a sea of fire. Zaku from Oto was a spiky-haired boy with a mean smirk and a strange metal contraption on his arm. The grass nin was armed with a spiked club and muscles that seemed to suggest he knew how to swing it, but all it took from Zaku was a single blow to destroy the grass nin's defense. Even as the punch missed, the grass nin staggered as if he had received the blow. He seemed to be struggling to stay on his feet, and a second punch to the stomach saw him blasted back as if Zaku possessed the strength of Tsunade. It was an interesting use of elemental chakra, and a useful weapon. However, a moment later, Zaku staggered, and collapsed. The spiked club that the Kusa nin had been wielding had split open, and from it had come a billowing cloud of haze. The poison must have been potent, because Zaku was down almost immediately, and in the end, the match was concluded as a draw. It was the last fight in round 1 that Naruto was forced to intervene. The wheel had been and the needle had settled on lightning. Naruto had created a series of 4-pillar bind, and lightning crackled and lashed out through the air as randomly as the blonde Anbu could make it. It didn't seem to make a difference for Gaara, whose quick-moving sand spun around him in a never-ending circle, sizzling as they blocked multitudes of low-voltage strikes. The Taki nin was not as adept at blocking, and suffered a series of small shocks, forcing him back. He had come to the fight with an entire reel of explosive tags, intending to break through Gaara's sand with pure force. It was to no avail, however, as Gaara's supply of never-ending sand simply swallowed the explosions with ease. In the end, the Taki nin found that he was surrounded by sand, and moved to escape. Gaara's bored expression had given way to a mad grin, and there was a disturbing glint in his eyes. Naruto watched stonily as the Taki nin failed to escape from all of the sand, a tendril shooting up his arm and grabbing him. Gaara made clenched his fist and the Taki nin screamed. The audience let out a ooh, and Naruto saw many of them wince as the Taki nin's arm disappeared underneath a volume of sound and a spray of blood. The winner was clear. This match is over, Naruto called. Winner, Gaara of. Naruto was cut off as Gaara continued to fight. His grin was truly demented now, his nostrils flaring, his pupils dilated. He spun his hands around, circling the boy with a cocoon of sand, and began to clench his hand. A boom resonated through the arena. Gaara jerked as all around him, the pillars of lightning glowed with maximum capacity. Then, thunder boomed, and lightning flashed. The pillars were unrelenting, shooting searing blots of bluish and purplish lightning all around Gaara. Sand rose to meet it, but unlike before it was visible pushed back, hissing and spluttering as the electricity pierced through it. At the same time, there was a flicker of movement as Naruto appeared before the sand nin, the Taki nin held over his shoulder and his blue eyes burning with a cold fire. He raised a hand and the shadow clones paused in their barrage. Gaara was panting, practically salivating, and there was a flash of foul, hideous chakra. The ground around him was scorched and broken, the barrage of countless strikes of lightning having torn it to pieces. Despite the assault, Naruto had not truly aimed at Sand's Jinchuriki, but his chakra was surging and he projected a tremendous force down on Gaara. I said that the match was over, Naruto said quietly, even as the audience muttered and talked to each other in hushed whispers. He locked eyes with Gaara, the Taki nin stirring on his shoulder. If you do that again, I'll disqualify you. Do you understand? Gaara opened his mouth to reply, but then a grimace crossed his face. His hand came up, clutching at his head and the tattoo that had been grafted into his skin. He shuddered, nostrils flaring, giggling oddly, and then became still. I understand, he replied between gritted teeth. Then he turned around muttering under his breath. Soon mother, soon, patience, there'll be more. Naruto watched him go, barely aware of the white-robed medical squad coming to take the injured genin from him. His mind flashed back to the sewer he had once walked into, of the leaky pipes and the dark crevice that led to those rattling chains. If Gaara was anything like him, then Naruto knew exactly why he was clutching his head. In a way, he was sympathetic. Regardless, it was obvious that Sans Jinchuriki was dangerous, and barely in control. How the fourth Kazekage had lost control of his own weapon, Naruto couldn't understand. Still, it didn't matter. If it came down to it, Naruto would put that rabid dog down. He took a deep breath, and then turned back to the audience. He dispelled the countless four-pillar binds and reached for his microphone. The first round of the Chunin exams is over, he said. Round 2 will begin in half an hour. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.